So, I think interesting and hopefully heated debate coming up for everyone. So, unbundling versus rebundling along the modern data stack is the topic. And so, what is unbundling? What is rebundling? Just to start, I think a good example of that was Craigslist as the, for example, original marketplace, right, where you could find every little thing as a marketplace that got unbundled into all kinds of different marketplaces, whether it's Airbnb for renting a room or Contact for getting a job done. And a similar thing you see happening along the modern data stack, where in the past you had maybe big all-in-one tools like a SaaS. More and more functions along the modern data stack are having dedicated tools. For maybe an Airflow that was doing everything end-to-end, to now dbt only in your transformation, Airbyte in your ingestion, metric layer tools, and it seems to be getting more and more split up. So the question is, where does that leave us, right? What opportunities does it bring for founders in the data space, I would say, but also for practitioners, right? What opportunities does it bring? What kind of risks? And yeah, where do we see this space going? So maybe to start, I'm curious, maybe for context for the audience, how did you get into building data products? And maybe to add, what is your one conviction about the modern data stack that kind of informed your vision for Y42?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me here, first of all. For those of you who don't know, Y42 is a software company based out of Berlin. So we are a startup as well as many of you here. And I think the special thing about us is we go a bit unconventional compared to all the companies in Silicon Valley. And what we do is we offer a bundled data stack, an all-in-one data platform that enables basically everyone to work with data. And so how did I get to this point? Well, I've always been in the data space. I studied statistics, even started my PhD in statistics. My father's a professor in statistics. My mom is a PhD in statistics. So I guess...
You do statistics.
Yeah. So I think I'm a very mathematical guy, but I'm definitely not the classical data engineer. I know how to use R, I know how to use Python, but to run some linear regression, but not like building up Kubernetes clusters, setting up Airflows, etc. These are things that I had to learn over the years. But funnily, in 2013, when I started with it, there wasn't even an Airflow. There was no Kubernetes. Well, it just came out at the time. So at the time, I studied at the CDTM. I think we are all in the startup bubble here, so you might know CDTM is an entrepreneurship program in Munich. And in my class, out of 25 people, we already have 5 unicorns. So we're quite successful, startup class. And so we all started companies after the CDTM. And luckily or unluckily, the first startup that I founded was quite successful. And all my other mates who started also, they all failed very quickly, and they went on to build billion-dollar companies right afterwards. But I stick a bit with my company for too long, and that was actually an event company. So we were operating in 20 different countries, running events, and that's like, how does this guy end up in building now, pretty complex data platform? Well, I was the data guy because we had a margin of 8%, and that's not a lot, even though we made millions in revenue. And so I had to improve the margin with data to 12% somehow. And we had to stitch together at the time, and there was Tableau, there was I used Alteryx for a while. I had to set up a PostgreSQL database. Facebook didn't really have APIs, and there was 2013, so really very, very hard to set up. However, it worked out. I actually managed, through the power of data, to increase our margin from 8 to 15%, and so that almost doubled the profit that we made. And this is why then I said, all right, let's not do that just for our events that cost 100,000 to set up, but let's try to do it with other events that maybe cost 8 or 9 figures to set up. And then we ended up building a data platform specialized for the live event industry. And at some point, 1/3 of all events in Europe would use our platform. So everything from Southside, Hurricane, Ed Sheeran, Justin Bieber. And so we were serving a rather less sophisticated audience who are event managers. But in their line of work, they generate a lot of data because there are millions of people going to a Justin Bieber concert. And after doing that for quite a while, the company got acquired by a German Fortune 100 company, and I started the company, which is called now Y42. And also one of the main reasons why I decided to step out of my old company was we built up a lot of technical debt. And there was no way for us that we could ever build a platform that goes outside of the scope of the live event industry. And I proposed that to my old investors, bosses, and said, well, we need 1 year to rebuild it. I have exactly the right architecture in mind, how that's supposed to look like. Well, that didn't work out well. So that's why I had to kind of restart the whole thing early 2020. But I do think that, I came into the game with a lot of experience over the years. So we built the product, like I've said, 1 year, went to market, grew quite fast. We're 150 people right now. The company is a bit over 2 years old. And I think, if we continue down that the path, and I know it sounds a bit cocky, but we will be one of the leading data companies, one of the rare leading data companies that actually come out of Europe. Just because, and I really want to repeat that, Europe is an amazing place right now to start a company. I just went to Data Council as a speaker where all these, got to know all the founders of DBT, Airflow, Airbus, whoever was there, right? And they have to deal with huge turnover for their software engineers, data engineers. The cost is extremely high there. So it's very difficult in Silicon Valley to build a product like ours because we are a big fish in a relatively mid-sized pond versus we would be a small fish in a big pond in the US. And it's always about relations, right? Like relatively speaking, we would be doing relatively speaking, we can get the best of engineers because there are no many data infrastructure companies around here in Europe. So we got people from Google, from Yandex, like really some of the best engineers I've worked with. And this is how we built up Y42. Sorry for the long intro, but I hope it was interesting.
I think it's really good to have that context, right? So how you got to the place where you are now. So, of course, bold statement to be one of the leading data companies, but I think a good ambition to have. So, what is your maybe one sentence conviction about the modern data stack that maybe others might disagree on, that will make Y42 the leading data company?
Can I take a guess? Oh.
Yes, please.
One. Oh. Test. Hi, better now. Okay, I'm just going to take a wild guess. The current modern data stack experience is broken.
99% the same sentence.
Do you want to elaborate a bit on why there could be a conviction that led you to build Y42?
So I always think of first principles. That's something extremely important to me. So when I started Y42, I didn't start the company to be rich quickly. Then I would just have kept my money and not start a company at all. And then Corona hit as well. So I'm looking straight into your eyes. You're saying I'm very mission driven. So I'm here to build a company that creates massive amount of value for society. And if we capture parts of it and we become a big company, so be it. But I'm very mission driven and very obsessed about data because that's like the only thing that we have to understand the world better. Like the only means to an end right now. But one day if we can read minds, well, so be it. We don't need to program or analyze data. But right now that's the best tool for us to really understand how the world works. And when we look at it, like I'm always trying to reason from first principle, then how would you build, if we have all the time in the world, if I had all the time in the world and quite enough funding to take the company for a long time by myself, then I would basically build a tool with a clean slate that is completely frictionless, that goes together hand in hand. And yeah, that just is very collaborative because that steers internal processes. And yeah, that just really enables everyone to understand each other, work with each other effectively. And this was the baseline when I started Y42. Doesn't matter how long it takes, we're going to build that. Obviously, it would be pretty stupid to build it longer than a year and not get feedback from the market. That's why we built it, went to market. And yeah, I hope that makes sense.
I mean, the question I would have, especially if you're saying, well, the goal is to build a very frictionless experience. My day-to-day, I realize, talking to many of you, every company is very, very unique in their set of problems, especially in the business logic that they want to apply to their data. So the question I'm having is, where is that confidence coming from in building something frictionless for a variety of companies when they do have very specific needs? Let's say, for one, the product is totally fine. Another one clearly needs to figure out data lineage very much in detail and probably needs to add a very dedicated tool that currently maybe Y42 doesn't have right now. Would that just mean like adding more features and features into the tool to basically satisfy all of these companies, or just being opinionated around what they actually need and what they might not need?
It's a combination of multiple things, like you said. So when we talk about Y42, and since the talk is about unbundling and rebundling, it's not that we don't use the best of breed tools, right? We do run an Airbyte under the hood. We develop 50 of the integrations, many of which are being used by Meltano. So the Singer community, we contributed a lot of integrations there. So we use Airbyte under the hood. Then also when we run an orchestrator, we also run Airflow under the hood. When we run our visualization tool, we run eCharts, which is from Baidu, which is significantly better than a Tableau online, right? When we talk about data transformation, we do run dbt also, but dbt doesn't consider the integrations part and the parts that come out of it, so it has a lot of inferior features. It's like the design of dbt is inferior in certain aspects. I'm a big fan of dbt, but there are parts that they don't cover well because they don't have to think of it end to end. So this part where things are broken of the interaction between the different tooling, this is when we also step in and build our own product around it, even our own engine. So I would say it's a split of 60 to 70% best of breed and 30 to 40% own, what we build on our own. And you have to look at it like this. So Y42 is, I mean, I like to compare in a technical sense like Terraform. So we are Terraform for data. And, but that's not a fair assumption because we're very UI driven. So you don't see it right now on our website. We're launching our V2. And what happens in the V2 is we build our own Git engine in the browser using WebAssembly. And what it does is we basically glue together all the tools. So you don't need 5 different APIs, you don't need 5 different CLIs, you don't need 5 different access control. You have it in one tool, and basically if you write Y42 run this model, we compile it down to dbt run this model, or we run it using our own UI model or whatsoever it is. If you run, hey, orchestrate, then we execute an Airflow orchestrate run under the hood for you. So basically we remove all the different commands, all the different APIs, or like very importantly, access control. Now it's all combined in one platform, version control and access control. It's all combined in one platform, meaning you have an end-to-end use case of, hey, I built my dashboard on my feature branch, I break it somehow, I don't have to commit it to main, or if I break it, I can easily roll back the entire data pipeline because everything is version controlled. Data tables inside your data warehouse is version controlled, not happening by dbt. Your integration settings is version controlled. Your obviously your modeling is version controlled, your dashboards are all version controlled, your orchestrator is version controlled on one platform. And so the innovation that we bring here is A, accessibility, because very strong on the UI, UX side, and B, we built the Git engine that glues everything together under one hood. So it's one API, one CLI, one version control, one access control, versus 5 or 6 different ones. And so we still run the best tools under the hood for the different use cases. So if you're an engineer, you can use our UI, drag and drop for the data analysts, less technical users. And if you can clone the repository, and then you can start coding directly in that repository. So I don't have a demo here, unfortunately, to quickly show you. But when you want to work with us, you just have to provide us one Git repo hosted on GitHub, GitLab, wheresoever. This is where every data gets saved to all the settings, but all the jobs. We use Git as a NoSQL database replacement. There's a talk about it on Data Council. Feel free to watch it on YouTube. The second part that we offer, also, that we need from you, is a data warehouse, such as Snowflake or BigQuery. And the third part is a cloud storage, such as S3, Azure Blob Storage, or Google Cloud Storage. And these are the 3 components that people, when they work with us, need to provide. And we are completely headless, meaning we save all your data either in your Git repo, in your cloud storage, or inside your data warehouse.
Impressive product, right? But I do think you still will always run into those really specific features that some customers will need that is not maybe in your priority in your roadmap yet. So do you not risk then creating or getting kind of these shadow systems where some parts, or maybe the easy parts, are going through Y42? And
not
the
really.
more specific parts are kind of still people buying the specific tools alongside that?
Not really, just because, like I said before, let's say you can do within Y42 extremely simple drag and drop. It compiles down to code that other people can edit. Or you can just, like I said, clone that repo and write any Python code you want within that repo itself. Like basically, it's an orchestrator that you can extend and call other ops in between. If you need another integration, where you can build your own integration following the Airbyte SDK and then just submit it, and then it's plugged right into Y42. So actually, for us, it's all about scalability. Like, scalability is always first, but scalability is becoming more and more a hygiene factor because the tooling has gotten so good, our technology has gotten so good by now. Like, we can process billions of rows in a second, obviously if you write the query right. But so all of this, it's about collaboration now, because collaboration is the only thing that makes internal processes scale. Because if you cannot throw more people into the problem and you become more efficient, then you cannot scale your company. It's that simple. So collaboration is another means to an end at the end of the day, and you cannot collaborate on 5 different tools just because the experience is completely, like, even simple collaboration features such as comment and resolve functionality. You don't want to comment and resolve in 5 different tools. You have it inside your Google Docs in one place. You can collaborate on that, right? You want to, like, data, like asset ownership, for example. Hey, who owns this integration? Who owns this modeling? What when it fails? Who's going to get notified? All of this is extremely broken in terms of collaboration if you have 5 or 6 different tooling and there's no single control layer on top of it that glues all of this seamlessly together.
I'm curious, Ole, actually from a practitioner's perspective then, right? So a lot of ventures are joining the Project A family, and you help them build on their first data stack. I think you're a fan of the unbundled approach, I'm guessing. So why do you choose that at this stage, maybe over the bundled approach?
That's an interesting question, one that I'm also asking myself. We're actually coming from a bit of a bundling experience. So when I joined the team 6 years ago, data engineering, PHP, I think we were all happy that that's not the case anymore, and we were all doing stuff in sort of our own open source platform. Unbundling has taken us actually a long way and has enabled a lot of efficiency and quicker iteration by just leveraging all these cool tools out there that we all know. I do agree with Hung that there is sort of a single control plane missing that basically allows you to orchestrate this all together. I'm just not certain how this eventually will look like in the end. I'm always very, from a practitioner perspective, always very careful with any kind of lock-in. So that's why actually some of our ventures that we supported 6 years ago were also at some point frustrated with some of the technologies that we have provided, because they were also very much locked in this bundled service that we did. And we're moving, just like you're doing as well, moving into a more modular stack. So, I mean, also you asked about specific case. I know that, for example, in your marketing attribution use case, you actually need to switch from SQL to Python because it gets too complex.
Yep.
And when I hear these kind of things, I'm thinking, okay, well, unbundling is necessary to basically pull that off. So maybe a question to you, is that really the case, or do you also see that a more bundled experience can actually help to manage all of this and orchestrate it better?
I think I agree with the fact that you need some place where it's all orchestrated and monitored, and you have the ability to see, okay, if I change something here in the ingestion, this dashboard or this data product breaks. I think you could almost call it like a data operating system, if you will, right? A data OS that I think goes back to this data platform idea. If you really want to build that and build kind of applications on top, then you need some kind of maybe operating system. I don't know if if a bundled solution is that operating system. So for me, an operating system will be more something that you can plug things in and out of. I think I'm also more of that approach. I think it also really depends on what type of company you are, right? So if you're, and we're here in a room with really data-savvy people, data engineers, right? So then you have kind of the skills in-house to also pull that off. I can imagine that if you're a more, let's say, traditional company, right, that has a hard time getting those skills in, then a bundled approach might make a lot of sense to just get the job done. I think still the biggest bundled product is still the whole Microsoft BI suite, right? So I think those are two totally disconnected communities. And we talk about all the data tools and what's hot and happening, but meanwhile, probably Power BI is still the 100 million pound gorilla in the room. And so for me, I would prefer more this data OS approach, I would say. And in that part, I'm also curious to hear from you, like what part of the data stack, other than sort of the orchestration maybe, but do you think is most broken right now?
You want me to go first? So I think we can do a lot. On my mind for a year now has been metadata a lot, and I think this could be not the one single control plane, but it can get us a bit further there. So we're trying to do a pretty good job, for example, creating metadata and defining data assets directly within the code so that it's not a manual experience anymore. But we're still quite frustrated by like further downstream tools not being able to consume and not able to basically benefit from best practices that we're applying in sort of a transformation environment. And this is still broken. So, I mean, there's still a lot of tools that just can't do this really well. And like treating metadata as a first-class citizen, if you type in that sentence, then you get 50 Medium articles. But I don't see it as much lived by the stack, and that's also because to some extent like links between different tools along the chain are a bit dysfunctional. So this is something that APIs need to improve, and we still have some room to grow. Yeah. What's your view on metadata and on this general?
Incredibly important. So I just spent a lot of time with Dylan and Scott. Dylan is the CEO of Figma, and Scott is the CPO of Adobe, on talking about collaboration, because we think that that's the enabler of really transcends organization to the next level. And when we talk about that, one part that I told Dylan as well is what really bothers me in Figma is the metadata. Like, it's one bundled platform already, but they don't have tagging, no description. They don't have, like, I cannot find the assets that I want to. I don't have ownership in that asset. Who owns that when I change something? There are no processes like of change approval, such as pull requests. in Figma, there's no like map where all of these assets, how do they link and interlink to each other. And this is exactly the same problem we see also with data, right? With like the data lineage, monitoring, observability, like metadata is, if not one of the most important part that helps you to not always constantly firefight, but you can be like proactive, setting up rules that stops the fire to happen in the first place. So we do have to take all the software engineering best practices slowly over to data and to actually many other business processes that we have. And so I fully agree, metadata, super important part, yeah, not done very well because of the unbundled nature, right? You can't go too far with unbundling, for example. So I want an iced coffee in a hotel. Then I need to, they don't have it, but I could make it myself. I just get milk, I get coffee, and I get ice. And that's already too far. Like, so there is an experience where you can offer, like, it's never the one way or the other. I would never opt in a company that builds a fully bundled product, everything on their own. That's just purely impossible. But as everything in life, the reality is somewhere in between, where you hit the perfect optimization spot that generates a lot of value for the majority of people. And this is the spot where you have to find, and metadata plays a major role in that. But what I would even see that is fundamentally broken is actually data modeling. And the reason why I'm saying that is you spend most of your time firefighting within data modeling. You build out layers of, like webs of tables inside your data warehouse. You don't have a way to control it. Git as a version control is not enough. You basically throwing more and more people to solve that problem. Things are being repeated. And so you don't follow certain standards. And so, like, look at Kimball. He wrote it, I don't know, his book 30 years ago, Dimensional, I don't know how many years, but Dimensional Modeling, or Data Vault 2.0. Like, those are practices, obviously. Data Vault 2.0, if you're an enterprise, you should, adopt this way of data modeling, but it basically forces you to follow certain standards, whereas DBT allows you to freestyle your table, where you kind of build some sort of a flat table here and then there, and so you're throwing in a lot of people to solve that problem and firefight in the middle. So I'm not sitting here to say we have a better solution for that, but that's something that I see as very broken within the modern data stack.
And I don't even know if you as a vendor can really solve this. DBT does a shitty job adding guardrails.
Yeah.
It's really like allowing the pissed off analyst that wants to become more technical to do all kinds of things. But if they sit in like decentralized squads, I mean, you're never going to end up with like a data transformation framework that makes sense and that creates like a unified, curated set of data assets. So that's never going to be the place. So a vendor can take you a certain way by implementing certain guardrails and implementing these best practices that you talked about. But then from a cultural, from an organizational perspective, we have to do a better job at basically aligning people. Sometimes I feel like blindly things that work really well in software development, like independent, autonomous, agile, are just being blindly added onto data teams and data structures, and unfortunately, until you reach a certain maturity, it simply doesn't work. Like some centralization initially is key.
Yeah, so it's still on us, basically, to follow the best practices like a Kimball was.
I would even go one step further. I do think that the vendors, speaking as the vendor, right, like we're trying to build in guardrails as well. We're trying to be very opinionated how things should be done. For example, maybe it's a very similar conversation we have with the Angular versus React community, right? Like in the front end, you go with Angular, like it's a very opinionated, highly scalable solution. You could go with React also. And so some people would argue, well, I kind of like the restrictiveness of Angular that forces me to build, best practices along the way. So I do think the vendor has more influence. And I'm just saying there's a tool right now called coalesce.io, right? Like this is, so it would be a competitor, but I'm just saying it out loud that I do think they're doing a much better job than DBT because they build in guardrails. They force the teams to do, dimensional modeling, data vault, or whatever, modeling, whatever style you choose, but you have to follow the guardrail. Otherwise, you cannot build out your model, and then you can really throw people with not that much experience, and they have like little rooms to errors. And that's also something like we are trying to incorporate with our tool over time as well.
One, I think, side topic that I was personally interested in as well is with this whole unbundling of the modern data stack. You see smaller and smaller functionalities within the data stack getting a dedicated tool. And it has been especially hard in the VC world to invest in these kind of tools, right? So is that actually a healthy thing, right? So what is the role of VC money in actually doing this unbundling, right? And trying to find the next fundable data company, and that splits off another small piece of functionality, puts a lot of money in, and maybe it's not worth it.
Yeah.
That's my
Sorry
hot
about
take
that.
question.
Because I mean, as a VC, of course, it's much harder to win in an existing category than it is in identifying and establishing a new one, and then potentially positioning your portfolio company as the clear leader in this one. So a lot of, for you as a practitioner, for example, just getting an overview of the tooling landscape and making a good purchase decision gets harder and harder because more and more categories are being created and then also blown up with VC money for marketing. So I totally understand frustration in data practitioners in basically just navigating all of this mess. And this is to some extent fueled by VC and by insane success stories in the past when you look at, I don't know, Datadog and Snowflake and insane, multiples that have been achieved before.
Are there certain part of the modern data stack where maybe you see companies failing because of this?
Failing?
Yeah, so where actually the functionality got too small to actually warrant a separate company or a separate tool?
I mean, this is a conversation I always have with our investment manager who looks into the space, and it always, like, one key question is always, is that a feature or can you build actually a company from this? Yeah. So we recently, for example, looked into business observability, like, do metrics change over time into certain boundaries? Do they make sense, like anomaly detection sort of thing? And figured out that it's rather a feature than like a standalone company that needs to be integrated again, and the metadata needs to be in there and synced and so on. So yeah, that's always the question we ask.
Yeah. I saw we had about 5 minutes, so maybe now is a good moment for
less
questions.
than 5 minutes. Could we move towards a conclusion now? Sooner, Shrinker. Thank you very much.
Maybe maybe as a last question, where do you think we're headed, and what are you most excited about in data? And then maybe let's hand it over for a few last questions.
I think it's the ongoing theme that I've always expressed myself, being able to work more efficiently, collaboratively is a big, enabler of working more efficiently as an organization. We as the human race moving forward, understanding the world better, working to understanding each other better. This is for me the reason why I'm in this game. And tooling, well, it's just a means to an end. But we happen to have a lot of good engineers here, so hire them in Europe, and we can. I'm very excited about building a generational data company out of Europe. This is my personal goal as well.
Tooling is just a means to an end is a really good way to put it, and sometimes people lose sight of the end. And I think tooling that you provide, or that also others provide now, basically empowers us to do a lot more and to create a lot more cool products and like really work on the end focus as well. That's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah. For me, also being able to do that really with actually a small team, right? Like a really one data engineer, an analyst, and a product manager, and being able to make so much impact and become the profit center that we all want to be. Maybe can we still hand it over to the audience?
Question for 542 on so much. Seems to me that effective use of open source is something that would be useful if I would myself be building a bundled set of tools. Would love to hear how you see your open source strategy, and that's actually the case or not for you.
Great question. So we have been asked a lot about open sourcing, and there are a couple of stuff that we already open source. Like I've said, a bunch of integrations, but following the Singer standard. And one other thing that we open source is, if you look it up, WASM Git. So it's WebAssembly Git that compiles libgit2, and libgit2 is a C implementation of Git that can run in the browser extremely efficiently. So that's something that we're heavily invested to, because that's a technology, I would say, if a company such as Contentful would adopt that, or if somebody wants to build a new CMS using that, I do think it's going to be very fruitful, putting the power of a Git client into the browser. So that's as an example. But what else do we offer that would be better than the other tools? I do think less. Only the gluing layer, this is what we do better, because that's our main focus of gluing everything together, like similar to building the providers for Terraform, right? But like, are we going to be a better orchestrator at some point than Airflow? Probably not. That's why we use Airflow, or in the modeling layer as well. And so yeah, we're trying to open source. If anything that we would open source would be the collaborative layer on top of it. Yeah. I think once you're getting bigger as a company, definitely yes. Currently we are 70 engineers. It sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's not that many if you have to do so many things at the same time. So I'm pretty sure there will be a time where we will contribute significantly more to the open source industry, just because, once again, we benefit so much from it as well. Yeah.
How do you we found a company but one that agree that stuff. Tomorrow will be 30,000 of us and 100 stack. Of course, if we are small, we can't continue to time, but when catch back. So, best approach, I buy a huge platform, and that's big. And on the other hand,
hopefully everybody got the questions. Basically, how to get started the right way. Maybe with an end-to-end platform, maybe not at all, maybe with a more unbundled experience. So whenever ventures for the first time come to me with the idea of building a data platform, I always push back pretty hard, asking them, that's kind of the sound I make, asking them if they really need something, because it does create a lot of technical debt. And even if you go for an end-to-end solution, it does not create maybe as much technical debt, but you still need someone to maintain and extend it. So that's why first you need some definitions in place. What do you want your data team to achieve? Is it for like the use case of reporting? Is machine learning at the core of the product, and thus you need like some more advanced use cases? So certain definitions need to be in place before you can actually make even that architectural decision. Instead of just going ahead and buying something off the shelf or building something yourself. So it really for me starts with like, what's the purpose of the data team? And also the trajectory of the company. I like what Rinke said about maybe more traditional companies or companies in an environment that cannot really hire data people easily. And I think they're in a more end-to-end solution makes a lot of sense, simply because you won't be able to internally build up the resources that would be necessary to basically plug together an end-to-end stack yourself. But always curious on like definitions, the environment, and so on. A lot of context.
I would even go one step further and say, especially if you're enterprises, you do need to rebundle the stack again, because the ratio of data engineers to data analysts grows significantly far apart at a bigger company, and you need a stack that combines everybody, every person together, but that also plays well with what you already have, so that plugs in your, like modular stack that you already have. This is what we see a lot with bigger enterprises as well.
Good. Well, we have to end it with that. Thanks a lot, Hung, and thanks a lot, Ole, for the interesting insights and heated debate. So please help me all in applauding.
Right, thanks so much. I'm going to keep it short. This was a hot debate by cool people. Let's follow up with some hot food over there. Lunch is partially served. Some stuff will be there. And yeah, it's followed by the 2 tracks that I mentioned earlier. So after lunch, you can either find yourself here in the Wartehalle for the analytics track, or go to our office, the 3rd floor, for the engineering track. Choose as you will. I have my favorite, I'm not going to say which one, but you choose as you will. And now, let's eat. Thanks.